Good morning.
Morning.
Let's make a start. So this morning we are looking at reading. Tomorrow's lesson will be writing, and we're looking at reference materials today. So the sorts of reference materials you might come across in your reading. So being able to recognise them. Okay, so let's look at our aims for this session. By the end of this session, you must be able to use some reference materials and resources, such as glossaries, keys, legends, and visual aids, and use them to find word meanings in different text types, straightforward and complex. You should be able to use a range of reference materials and resources, such as glossaries, keys and legends, visual aids, footnotes, and endnotes. And finally, you could identify primary, secondary, and tertiary sources. Okay, so to start, I have a question for you. So if you were reading and came across a word or a phrase that you didn't understand, what would you do? So you don't understand the word or phrase. How could you find out what it means? What could you do? Anyone?
I use a dictionary.
Yeah, use a dictionary. Well done. Any other ways of finding out the meaning of a word or phrase?
Translating.
So, well, you could, but if we're thinking of keeping it all in English, how could you, as well as using a dictionary?
Yeah.
What else could you do? What other resources are there to find out the meaning? Okay, let's have a look at some ideas. So use Wikipedia. You could use a dictionary. You could ask someone else. So you could ask a friend, you could ask a teacher, you could ask a colleague, and so on. You could use a thesaurus. So a thesaurus will give you other words that mean the same thing, and you might find a word that you do understand, so then you will know what that puzzling word is. You could look on the internet. So what everybody does these days goes to Google if we find something we're not sure about. If you're reading a book, an article, a report that has footnotes, then you could have a look at the footnotes on the page to see if they give you some explanation. If it's a more technical text, you could check if there's a glossary, and you could use a key. So there might be a key in the text that you are reading. So lots of different ways that we could aid our own understanding. Okay, so thinking about in-text references. So these will be references or information that is within the text that you are reading. So you don't have to go elsewhere to find out the meaning of a word or a phrase. So these features could be things such as a glossary of terms or words, a legend or key, visual aids, so it could be a photograph or a diagram, footnotes, which come at the bottom of a page, or endnotes, which come at the end of a book or report or article. So has anyone come across any of these before? So are any of these things that you recognise?
Please, yes.
Yeah. So I'm sure we've all seen visual aids. So we've been reading, for example, you're reading an article about a particular museum. There might be a photograph of the museum. And fiction and non-fiction can include footnotes. So, for example, a historical fiction book might include some footnotes to explain about a particular event or person that perhaps really existed, even though it's fiction, or it could be non-fiction, and the footnote gives you more information about something that is referred to, such as some data, or again, it could be a person or place. So looking first at glossary of terms. And this is a list of terms in a special subject, field, or area of usage with accompanying definitions. So it's like having a mini dictionary in the text, just to explain some technical terms or unusual vocabulary which might not be commonly understood. So they might be quite specific to that subject area or theme. So we've got an example here. The text in italics is the example, and then we've got the glossary on the right-hand side. So I'll read through it if you follow on your own screen. The front side of the oak drawer was more times as long as the height of the side panels that I was planning to make. So I decided to use that to make the adjacent panels, readying the wood by unscrewing and removing the two drawer handles, gently knocking the drawer apart with a driving baton, quite easy as it was only held together with dove joints. Hacksawing the wood to length, measuring from both ends to make the cut so that both pieces retain the dove joints, placing a mason's square above the dove joints, marking a straight line and using a handsaw, cutting down to the depth of the dove joints. Using a chisel to bang out the dove joints, leaving a near perfect half joint almost the same depth as the thickness of the shelf. Okay, so that extract there, that example is quite technical about joinery carpentry. Not something that I am familiar with at all. So, and which may be the case for some of you listening as well. So the words that are highlighted in orange are things that the writer believes might need a bit of explanation, because some people reading this text won't be familiar with them. So a driving baton, a small headed hammer. So it's knocking the drawer apart with a small hammer. So that makes perfect sense now, we know that. And then it was only held together with dove joints. So an interlocking joint. So it's not held together with nails or glue, it's just an interlocking joint. So that's why it was easy. And then further on, the mason's square, which is a tool for marking straight lines and right angles. So again, that helps us to understand what this person, this carpenter, was doing. So that's why a glossary might be needed, and why you might find one in a technical document or text. Any questions about a glossary? Okay, so if you, in your assessment, in your test, have a text or document to read that has a glossary, so make sure that you read those definitions to ensure that even if you think you know what those technical terms mean, just to make sure that you're using the definition given in that particular text and glossary. So a key is probably something that all of us have seen at some time when looking at a map. So it may be that you went to visit a theme park, for example, and they give you a map of the park and it has a key to show you what the symbols on the map mean. So on a map, we don't want to have too much writing, especially if things are repeated. So we have a key. So the key is a table with the examples from the example symbols and their meaning, and the legend is used with a key to explain how to use that key. Okay, so you might just get a key, or you might also have a legend which explains how to use it. Sometimes you don't need the legend, the key is enough. So you can see there in that image, there is a map of, it looks like the San Francisco area, and there are blue flags with a number on, and there are white circles with a number on. And the white circles are local routes, the blue flags are interstate routes, and the legend tells us that this key, the local and interstate routes, are referring to highways of California. Any questions about keys or legends? Okay, let's move on. I'm sure those ones are key, is something that you've all seen at some point. So visual aids are something that I'm sure you've also seen at some point. So the text might refer to a visual aid alongside the writing. So it could be a photograph. So if you were reading an article about a historic building, for example, it might feature a picture of the building to illustrate the text. Or it could be about an animal and there's a picture of the animal, so you can imagine what you're reading about. But it could also be a map. It could be a chart or diagram, a chart or graph showing data. It could be a diagram. So the example could be a part of the body, for example, the heart. You're reading a biology textbook and there's a diagram of the heart, for example. Or it could be illustrations. You'll also see those, particularly in fiction books. But all types of texts do use visual aids to illustrate, to help with the layout, to make it look attractive to read, and also to aid understanding. So we've got an example here. Riding coast to coast in 3 days with Alan Smithick. Aged 40, overweight and single, I decided to turn my life around. A work colleague suggested getting in training to do the annual Old Successonians 104-mile 3-day trip from Whitard in Essex, to Winchelsea on the Sussex coast. The route, as pictured on the right, involved a mix of rural beauty and London chaos. It was to change my life. In that extract there, the writer Alan Smithick mentions the route. If you're not familiar with that part of the country, which I'm not myself, then the map helps you to understand what the route was, so that you can imagine that while you're reading. Any questions about visual aids? Is that something you are familiar with, something you've seen before?
I'm not familiar with visual aids, please.
Yeah, so you have seen those before.
No, please.
Okay. So keep a lookout when you're reading anything over the next few days. Keep a lookout for these sorts of features. Oops. Moving on now to footnotes. Footnotes appear at the bottom of pages of text referring to other sources of information. They can be direct quotes, summaries, or paraphrasing. Often, or most likely to be found in non-fiction, but you do sometimes see them in fiction as well. And they expand on where information has come from, or it could be referencing a particular book that's been referred to in the text, or a little bit, sometimes a short piece of information regarding something the author's referred to. We have an example here, and this one is quite detailed. It has been argued over and over again that one should pronounce scone in a certain way. And then you can see that little number 1 there. So that tells us that we need to look at footnote 1. John Lamb, perfect pronunciation from augment to xanthite, and it gives us all the details of the book, when it was the publisher, when it was published, and where to find that information, the pages 78 to 90. So that is where the author has got this information from, that scone should be pronounced in a certain way, from John Lamb's book. However, so going back to the example now, however, Neville has recently produced conclusive evidence that it should really be pronounced one way, claiming the original Scottish is with a long O, as in toast. And then again, we've got that little number 2 there. We can see in this example, the quotation marks tell us they are someone else's words. So the author of the text we're reading didn't write these words himself, or he didn't come up with them himself. He's taken them from someone else's text. So that's why they're in quotation marks, to show us that. And the little number 2, we look at the footnotes at the bottom of the page and we can see who wrote those words, whose words he is using. And it comes from Sheila Neville's book, Words in History, and it was published in London by Green in 2007. And if we look at pages 56 to 62, we can read her work, including that quote. Okay, does that make sense? So if you have ever read any academic books when you've been studying, then you are likely to have seen an example of footnotes. And just to note there that the reference refers to, and this is a particular order, which if you've ever had to write essays, you will know about the Harvard referencing system. So note the reference refers to author, title, publisher, year of publication, and pages the information is from, so that you can go away and read further. Okay, any questions about footnotes or about anything we've looked at so far? Okay. So endnotes are basically the same as a footnote, but rather than appearing at the bottom of every page, you will still have the little number like we saw in this example. So the number 1 or the number 2, and it will follow on in order. So we'll still have the number, but rather than looking at the bottom of the page, as the name suggests, you will go to the end of the article or book, whatever the text is, you'll go to the end to find the note. So often endnotes are used because the notes themselves are highly detailed. So to put it at the bottom of the page, it might take up half the page, which it's not really appropriate in the text to have half a page just for your footnote. So they'll use endnotes instead, and you need to just flick to the back of the book or the end of the text to find them. So they're often highly detailed in texts where multiple pages are using lots of reference notes or the notes are very long. So it's just a case of organisation, really, why endnotes might be used instead of footnotes. But they will follow the same principle and have the referencing as we see here. So that's how to recognise them. So any questions at all? Okay. Moving on to types of sources. So sources that writers use can come from anywhere. They are split into 3 types. So sources are the inspiration, the facts, the content, where that comes from. So there's many different types of sources and they can come from all different places, but they are split into 3 types. And first of all, we have primary sources, which are first-hand sources. So you're getting the information straight from the person that thought of it or said it or wrote it down. So it's just their own thoughts or experiences, either said out loud to somebody in an interview, for example, or written down. So a novel would be a primary source because that is somebody's thoughts. They've used their imagination and they've written the novel. Diaries. So obviously someone's experiences written down. That's their own first-hand experience. So that's a primary source. So any questions about primary sources? Okay, so moving on to secondary sources. These are interpretations and evaluations of sources. So, for example, an article or biographies. So, a biography of a particular person would be a secondary source, and that biography most likely, so a biography, someone writes a book about somebody else's life, that biography is likely to have used primary sources. So they may have read diaries that the person kept, they may have interviewed that person, or they may have read interviews with that person. So they've used the primary sources and it's now become a secondary source because they've read it, they've thought about it, they've interpreted it, evaluated it and written their own version of those experiences, those that person's life. Also articles, so in a magazine or a newspaper, you might see an article written about a particular person, but there's no quotes at all. They've just used other interviews to write that article. They haven't interviewed the person themselves. Or it could be an article about anything. It could be an academic article in a journal, but they are writing about other people's data, other people's experiences, rather than writing about their own. So they've collected a lot of information about a topic together, but it's not original. It's not something they've done themselves. So any questions about secondary sources? Okay, and looking at tertiary or third level sources, these are collections of primary and secondary sources. So examples would be textbooks, wikis, so looking online. So a textbook, so say, for example, a science textbook, it might include information from primary sources. So somebody who has done particular research might be talking about it, and that's included. That's a primary source. But then it may also include information that is from articles that were written about that subject, if that makes sense. So it's a collection of primary and secondary sources. Now, any questions about different types of sources? Okay, so it's good to be aware of that there are different types of sources, and to be able to recognise those in the text that you are reading. Okay, so let's start our quiz for today. What is or which of these is an incorrect way to look up a word? In a dictionary, in a glossary, online, or there isn't an incorrect way? So which of those?
I think D.
Yeah, well done. Okay,
Yes,
so
yes,
no,
same. I
just
think it's D.
yeah, it is D, that's right. So different methods might be better for different sources. So if it, for example, if it's just one word that you don't understand, obviously you would just go to a dictionary. But if it's something longer, it might be better to use a different source. But there isn't a wrong way. Which of the following is not a reference tool? A key, a footnote, a backnote, a glossary, an endnote. So think about what we've looked at today, the different features, reference tools. Which of those is not something we've covered? It's not a reference tool.
Backnote.
Backnote, well done. So we do have footnotes and endnotes, but not backnotes. Where are you most likely to see a glossary? An instruction manual, an email, a newspaper article, or an advert? So remember that a glossary is like a mini dictionary that's included in a text to aid understanding of particular words. It might be quite technical. So where would you
Newspaper
find?
article.
Yeah, an instruction manual. Good. Oops. So they help define unusual or technical words and terms. Okay, so we've got a bit of reading to do here. Look at this glossary of terms for the rules of chess. So in that blue box there on the right, it's a glossary of terms for the rules of chess. Which of the following is an abbreviation? Back rank, bullet chess, KT, mobility, or skewer? So which is an abbreviation? So an abbreviation is something that's short for something else. So
KT.
yeah, KT. So if we look at the glossary, KT even tells us there, KT short for a knight or a piece in chess. Well done. Which of the following, which of the below defines an aggressive move? Back rank, bullet chest, KT, mobility, or skewer? So for this question, you need to read the definitions in the blue box and decide which one sounds like an aggressive move. Anyone want to have a go?
I believe that is E.
Yeah. So skewer is an attack on a valuable piece. So an attack sounds aggressive, doesn't it? Well done. Which of the following shows a player's ability? So a player's ability. So if you have a look at those definitions, which one is about the player's ability?
Mobility. D.
So if we read, so let's read that definition: ability of a piece to move around the board. So that one's talking about the ability of a piece. So you have looked for that word ability, but we're thinking about the player. So which one of them refers to the player?
A. Back
Back
rank.
race.
Good. So a player's first rank. So how they compare to others. So that would show their ability. Well done. So it was a bit of a trick one, that. But let's look at the next one. So which of the below shows a piece's ability? So which one do you think that would be? So we've already mentioned it.
D.
D, good. So
Yeah.
the ability of a piece to move around the board, that shows the piece's ability. Well done, D. Okay. If you saw this symbol on a map, what do you think it would represent? A mosque, a hospital, a wildlife reserve, a place of historical interest. So we've got that symbol there. It's a very simple symbol, but it's reminiscent of a building up some steps, some columns. Looks like quite an old building. Which one of those do you think it would represent?
D.
A.
D. Did somebody say D?
Yes.
D.
Yeah, so that's correct. A place of historical interest. So this is an actual symbol that is seen on maps to show a place of historical interest. It's meant to represent like a museum. So, but it may be used to represent something like a castle or another place of historical interest on a map. It might not necessarily be a museum. But not to worry, because when you do your assessment, you will be given a key if you have to look at a map and find information. Okay, so if you are reading an article, what kind of source would you expect an article to be classed as? Primary, secondary, tertiary, or none of them?
Secondary.
Secondary, yeah. Let's have a look. So yes, it's secondary because they use other reference material. So well done. What kind of source would you expect a novel to be classed as?
A novel. Primary.
primary. Good. Because it's an original story that someone's thought of and written down. So it's their ideas. It's straight from the writer's brain, in other words. Okay. So we've come to the end for today. Does anyone have any questions at all about what we've looked at today, or more generally? Okay, so if you go on to online learning environment, so you should have a login for that from the office. If not, you'll need to contact the office on Monday and ask for that. But when you log in, you should be able to access your functional skills resources. So at some point next week, there'll be a recording of today's session put on there. And also you will be able to see a knowledge check and other useful information about today's session. So also looking at what we've looked at today, you'll be able to do some practice. You can also look at the practice papers on there as well. So if you want to start looking at the practice papers, at the type of questions that you're going to get asked, then that's a good place to start. Okay, any questions before we finish?
Question: Is it possible? Is it possible for the learning material to be sent to our email?
Do you not have an email? Do you not have a login for the system?
I have.
It's probably best if you log in where you can download things, because then you can see everything that has been covered so far, and any other courses that you signed up to. It's all there in one place. If you have a problem with logging in, if you contact Jill in the office, she should be able to help you with that. If there was something particular you wanted to have emailed, then you could ask her about that, but it's probably best to give her a call.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, and hopefully you will join me tomorrow morning for our writing lesson.
About what time?
It's at 9 o'clock again tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye.
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 Bye.